Tonight is the eve of the 26th of Muharram, 1445 after the Hijrah. This weekend's Majalis is dedicated to commemorating the martyrdom of our fourth Imam, Imam Ali ibn al-Hussein, Zayn al-Abidin alayhi salam. Tonight's program will begin with the recitation of Salam and Marsiya by Brother Shafqat Shah. The Majlis will be addressed by our visiting scholar, Shayk Faiyaz Jaffer of New York. After the Majlis, there will be Taboot and Matam, and the Noha will be recited by Brother Sajjad Zaidi. The program will conclude with Ziyarat. Let us begin the program. Please welcome Brother Shafqat Shah to the podium for recitation of Salam and Marsiya with the Salawat ala Muhammad wa Ali Muhammad.
Salawat par Muhammad wa Ali Muhammad. کہہ کے رک گئے سجا بتایا نہ گیا کہہ کے رک گئے سجا بتایا نہ گیا ارے کون سا ظلم ہے جو شام میں ڈھایا نہ گیا کہے کہ یہ رک گئے سجا بتایا نہ گیا تو زنجیر میں جکڑے ہوئے قیدی کے سوا کسی بیمار کو کانٹوں پہ چلایا نہ گیا کہے کہ یہ رک گئے روئے سجاد بہت دیر تلک زندہ میں روئے سجاد بہت دیر تلک زندہ میں لاش جب بالی سکینہ کا اٹھایا نہ گیا کہے کہ رک گئے دیکھا سیراب ذبیحے کو تو بولے سجاد دیکھا سیراب ذبیحے کو تو بولے سجاد ہنستے ہوئے لوگوں کی وہاں بھیڑ سے ڈر جاتی ہنستے ہوئے لوگوں کی وہاں سر بھی بازار میں عابد سے اٹھایا نہ گیا کہے کہ یہ رک گئے باپ کا سر جو ملا سوئی لپٹ کر ایسے باپ کا سر جو ملا سوئی لپٹ کر ایسے ارے ماں سے بھی بالی سکینہ کو جگایا نہ گیا کہے کہ یہ رک گئے جب تک نہ گئے سارے شرابی تب تک جب تک نہ گئے سارے شرابی تب تک ارے ثانی زہرا کو دربار میں لایا نہ گیا کہے کہ یہ رک گئے سجاد بتایا نہ گیا کہے کہ یہ رک گئے صلوات محمد بارہ دیگر برچی صلوات یہ سوچتا ہوں کہ عابد کا حال کیا ہوگا یہ سوچتا ہوں کہ عابد کا حال کیا ہوگا اسیر ہو کہ وہ جب شام میں گیا ہوگا یہ سوچتا سنا ہے شام میں جاتے ہی خون رونے لگا سنا ہے شام میں جاتے ہی خون رونے لگا نہ جانے شمر نے اس وقت کیا کہا ہوگا، یہ سوچتا ہوں گلے کے طوق نے عابد کو کیا جھکانا تھا، گلے کے طوق نے عابد کو کیا جھکانا تھا، وہ اپنے کھوئے ہوئے لال ڈھونڈتا ہوگا، یہ سوچتا ہوں وہ ظلم دیکھے ہیں سجاد نے حسین کے بعد، وہ ظلم دیکھے ہیں سجاد نے حسین کے بعد، مجھے یقین ہے کہ اب تک بھی رو رہا ہوگا، یہ سوچتا ہوں وہ یاد کرتا تو ہوگا وطن کی شاہی کو، وہ یاد کرتا تو ہوگا وطن کی شاہی کو، بہن کو دفن جو پردیس میں کیا ہوگا، یہ سوچتا ہوں کہ عابد کا حال کیا ہوگا، اسیر ہو کے وہ جب شام میں گیا ہوگا، یہ سوچتا ہوں۔ صلی اللہ علیہ محمد وعلی محمد۔
محمد وعلى محمد صلوات
اللهم صل على Muhammad Ali Muhammad. MashaAllah, for Brother Shayk Shah's health, safety, and continued blessings, please recite the salawat ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad. Before moving forward with the program, I'd like to share some important community announcements. A community member wants to offer a very special gift to the winner of a raffle draw for the benefit of Beit al-Ilm. The raffle is for a beautifully crafted ring made of the blessed white stone from the grave of Imam Hussein alayhi salam and Hazrat Abbas alayhi salam. Allahumma salli ala Muhammad wa ali. Tickets are $50 and the drawing for the raffle will be at the conclusion of Ayam Azhar. For more information, contact Sister Fatima Walji. Beit al Sunday School is doing its annual Arba'in food drive. As we remember the thirst and hunger of the family of the Prophet, let's help those who are less fortunate in our own communities. There are boxes at the main entrance where you can drop your donations. You can donate non-perishable food and groceries, as well as personal hygiene items. We are looking for volunteers to help with the food drive. If you are interested, please email the Sunday School at baitalilm@gmail.com. Every Saturday we have a ladies and girls majalis, and it will continue every Saturday until September 23rd. The time of this majlis is at 11 a.m. and the majlis is being held in English, and it is addressed by Khanum Maryam Ali Tahir. If you are interested in reciting, please visit the Beit al website, select women's programs, and complete the sign-up form. Finally, tonight after the Majlis, the Mehdi Youth Group and the Sacred Roots Student Collective will be hosting a discussion with Shayk Faiyaz Jaffer centered around the topic of curing the heart of spiritual disease. The program will begin at 10:15 after the Majlis and is open to brothers and sisters aged 14 and up. Before I invite Maulana to the member, I want to acknowledge the sponsors of tonight's program. The sponsors are Brother Tahir Mirza and family. They request that you remember the marhumeen of your families and the marhumeen of their families. In particular, Ahmadi Begum, who we all know as Khala Jan, Zahra Begum, Muhammad Habibullah, and Mirza Ali Naki. Please remember all the marhumeen with the Surah Fatiha and 3 Surah Ikhlas preceded by As-Salawat ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad. Allahumma salli ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad. Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. Alhamdulillah Rabbil Alameen ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. Maliki yawmiddin, iyyaka na'budu wa iyyaka nasta'in. Ihdinas siratal mustaqim. Siratal ladzina an'amta 'alayhim ghayril maghdubi 'alayhim waladdallin. Qul huwallahu ahad, Allahu samad, lam yalid wa lam yulad wa lam yakul lahu kufuwan ahad. Bismillahir rahmanir rahim. Qul huwallahu ahad, Allahu samad, lam yalid wa lam yulad. Bismillahir rahmanir rahim. Qul huwallahu ahad, Allahu samad, lam yalid wa lam yulad wa lam yakul lahu kufuwan ahad. Tonight's majlis will be addressed by Shayk Faiyaz Jaffer. Shayk Faiyaz comes to us from New York. He completed his undergraduate studies at the State University of New York, Stony Brook in political science and religious studies. He did his master's in Islamic studies with a concentration on early Islamic history after his undergraduate degree. Shayk Faiyaz finished his classical Islamic education at the Islamic Seminary of Karbala in Iraq. Shayk Faiyaz is currently the adjunct assistant professor of public service at NYU's Robert F. Wagner Graduate School of Public Service. He is also the assistant research scholar for the Islamic Center at New York University and an associate chaplain for the Center of Global and Spiritual Life at New York University. We are grateful that he has taken time out of his busy schedule to address the community this weekend. Please welcome him to the minbar with a salawat ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad. Allahumma salli ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad. And if I can ask the brothers to please move forward as Maulana gets on the minbar. Salawat ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad.
رحم الله من قرأ سورة المباركة الفاتحة. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. الرحمن الرحيم مالك يوم الدين إياك نعبد وإياك نستعين. اهدنا الصراط المستقيم صراط الذين أنعمت عليهم غير المغضوب عليهم. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. رب اشرح لي صدري أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم وبه نستعين صلى الله عليك يا سيدي يا مولاي يا رسول الله وعلى أهل بيتك المذلومين صلى الله عليك يا سيدي يا مولاي مولاي وابن مولاي يا أبا عبد الله يا رحمة الله الواسعة ويا باب نجاة الأمة يا غريب يا مذلوم يا تشان كربلاء ما خاب من تمسك بكم ولمن من لجأ إليكم سادتي يا ليتنا كنا معكم فنفوز والله فوزا عظيما قال الله العظيم في محكم كتابه الكريم وقوله الحق ولأصدق القائلين أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم قل إن كنتم تحبون الله فاتبعوني يحببكم الله ويغفر لكم ذنوبكم والله غفور رحيم آمنا بالله صدق الله العلي العظيم صلوا على محمد Before anything else, the first stage and step of progress that we make within our faith tradition is to increase our knowledge and our understanding of the Creator. For in the hadith of Ali, he states, أَوَّلُ الدِّينِ مَعْرِفَةُ that the first stage of religion is in terms of knowing and understanding and comprehending Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Our ultimate objective is to seek Him, toward understanding Him, toward fulfilling our ultimate goals and objectives and responsibilities, which is to being His best servant. Allahumma ij'alni min ahsani abidika nasiban indak wa aqrabihim manzilat mink. As we recite in Dua Kumail, Ali alayhi salam, he says, "Oh Allah, allow for me to be the best and the closest in proximity to you, and those who are amongst the highest in ranks in terms of their love and obedience and servitude to you, O Allah." And theologians, they break down and they suggest that there are 4 different stages or levels that we encounter and endure in terms of our awareness and understanding when it comes toward this notion of having ma'rifah of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. The first stage is when we get exposed to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala via what are known as His af'al, His actions. Throughout us, every single day, during the course of our lives, we are exposed to, at the very least, this reality and this nature of Allah Azza wa Jal. Which is why God consistently commands us toward taking a look at His signs. We look up at the stars and the sun and the moon and the oceans and the rivers and the trees. All of these are meant to be a mechanism by which we increase our knowledge of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. سَنُرِيهِمْ آيَاتِنَا فِي الْآفَاقِ. God says within the Holy Quran, we have put on display our signs for you within the horizons. We are consistently bound by the uniqueness of the creation of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. The ultimate and the end goal of these signs, like any sign when we're driving down a highway, is to take us toward our ultimate destination. And God, He states that the sun and the moon and the stars, the rotating of night into day and of day into night, the oceans and the rivers and the trees, the winter to the spring and from the spring to the summer, all of these are signs of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. What's the purpose again of the sign? Except to take us toward our ultimate destination. Our destination ultimately being Him subhanahu wa ta'ala. So on the very first level, amongst those ways that we increase our ma'rifah of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is by being witness to His signs. And through these signs, increasing our knowledge of Him subhanahu wa ta'ala. The second level of ma'rifah of Allah Azza wa Jal is not only through His signs, but through an awareness of what are known as His asma wa sifat, His names and His attributes. We know that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is the all-merciful, is the all-compassionate, is the all-just, is the all-loving, is the creator of all things, the all-hearing and seeing, the all-omnipotent, so on and so forth. And it of course doesn't suffice that we just memorize that nasheed that tells us all of the names of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala without a sense of awareness and understanding. وَلِلَّهِ الْأَسْمَاءُ الْحُسْنَى فَادْعُوهُ بِهَا. God says within the whole Quran that He has the most beautiful of names. So call upon Him by those names, but the calling upon Him by Ar-Rahman or Ar-Rahim or Al-Ghafur or As-Sabur or Ash-Shakur or whatever these names of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala are, is not only through the calling of tongue, but like we know, through an awareness and a presence of heart. And so the second level of having deep understanding and ma'rifah of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is not only from the physical signs that we are witness to on a day-to-day basis when we're walking or when we're driving or whenever it may be, but through a deep cognizance and awareness that over here, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala's mercy has been put on display. And in this location, the creative power of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has been put on display. Let me give you an example. That today, for instance, I go out for a walk. And when I'm going for a walk, I see this really beautiful flower. And me, in my ignorance of any knowledge of what goes into the, systems in the biological world that allow for this flower to grow in terms of its beauty, the only thing that I see is, wow, this flower is pretty beautiful. Let me take a picture of it and send it to my family, for instance. Then I go back home. Somebody else walks by that same exact flower, but they are aware at the very least of the art of gardening, which clearly I'm not. And they garden and they plant and they put a whole garden of flowers in their backyards of their homes. They know how much effort needs to go in and what takes place in society and in nature in order to allow for this beautiful flower to appear itself in the park. Then that person goes back home. And a third person walks by. And they are a student of botany. They are a student of the science of gardening or of flowers, excuse my ignorance if anyone's a botanist in here. And they see that, and in their mind, they are reading all of these studies about what takes place in order for this beautiful flower to appear, and they themselves have a deeper knowledge and awareness and understanding of what took place in order for this beautiful flower to present itself in this garden. 5 minutes later, a fourth person walks by. And that fourth person is the professor of botany. All of a sudden, their level of knowledge is much higher than any of those who preceded. Again, and their appreciation for that beauty of that flower is at an even higher level, no? Now imagine if the Messenger of God, Muhammad sallallahu alayhi wa alihi wa sallam, he walks by that same flower. His awareness and knowledge is very different than anyone who preceded. Because at the very moment that he sees that flower, he sees the power, and he sees the authority, and he sees the grace, and again he sees the creative potential, and he sees the mercy, and he sees all of the names of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala manifesting themselves and reflecting themselves such that that flower has appeared into my eye. And for him, it becomes a means by which not only he is reminded of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, but through the lens of his heart, he sees Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And that brings us then to the third level. The first level is that which every one of us are exposed to, the af'al of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. We see the signs, we see the physical realities. The second level are when we see the wisdom of God, we see the mercy of God, we see the names and the attributes of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala within creation. The third level is the level of the knowledge that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala places in the heart of those whom He loves. He states in this famous hadith al-Qudsi that is attributed to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, in which He communicates with the Messenger of God, Ya Ahmad, kuntu كنزا مخفيا فأحببت أن أعرف. That I was a hidden treasure and I loved to be known. فخلقت الخلق فبه عرف. So I created the creation so that via the creation they have come to know me. That for those who are amongst the choicest recipients of this blessing and honor due to our devotion to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, He places His love in our hearts and allows for us to see Him at any and at every given moment. Where is a good example of this? A good example of this is on the day of Ashura. Imam al-Hussein alayhi salam has lost everyone. He has lost every single one of his family members and companions. And he is alone in the battlefield. And one of the members of the army of Umar ibn Sa'ad, as Imam al-Hussein alayhi salam is fighting against the enemy, calls out, "Unzuru ilayhi la yubali bil maut." But look at this man. Death doesn't faze him. Why? Because at that moment, the only thing that Hussein ibn Ali ibn Abi Talib saw was Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. This is best personified by Zainab alayhi salam when she utters that famous line as Ibn Ziyad questions her understanding of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. How do you feel, O Zainab, of what happened to your brother and to your children and to you all? And what does she respond except with her epic line? "Ma ra'aytu illa jamila." I did not see anything but beauty. Why? Because she sees Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Due to her devotion and due to her obedience, God places His love in her heart, and the only thing that she sees is the realities that she sees. And the fourth level of understanding or of ma'rifah of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is that knowledge that is solely limited to only Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala Himself. Meaning that there is a part or there is a reality of Allah Azza wa Jal known as His essence, that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, He has that knowledge contained within Himself. So we move through these various degrees and through these various grades during the course of our lives, with the ultimate goal and aspiration, once again, my friends, to increase our knowledge and our understanding and our relationship with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And for today's discussion, insha'Allah, I want to reflect upon some important lessons that we can learn, specifically from the life and legacy of Imam Ali ibn Hussein al-Sajjad, alayhi salatu wassalam, by which he has taught us how to perceive and how to understand and how to increase in our ma'rifah of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And there is one fundamental and common theme that you consistently see within many of his du'as and many of his supplications. And that is that the relationship that Imam Ali ibn Hussein has with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is often totally and entirely built on this foundation and on this basis of what it means to increase in our love of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So for today's discussion, insha'Allah, I want to reflect upon how we can understand how to love Allah Azza wa Jal on three different dimensions. The first dimension is in terms of how Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, He demonstrates love for His creation. The second dimension is in terms of how we can reciprocate love back to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And the third dimension of the discussion in terms of how we can implement or cultivate a society and a culture and a community on this foundation of love as well. So let's jump right into dimension number one of the conversation. How does Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, He Himself, in His magnanimity and in His authority, how does Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala show love for His creation? Firstly, what does it exactly mean toward loving God in the first place? According to Muslim theologians and philosophers historically, they've long debated in terms of what it means when we talk about how we are meant toward loving Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And there have been three major schools of thought or three opinions that have presented themselves throughout history. The first opinion suggests that our love of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is on the basis of the fact that God has given us so many a blessing. And because God consistently blesses us, our responsibility and duty is to love Him subhanahu wa ta'ala. It sounds pretty basic, but at the same time it seems pretty shallow, no? Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala gives me things, so I love Him. When I give my child something, my child loves me. What happens when I don't give my child something? Maybe they won't love me. Our relationship many a times is very similar when it comes to our understanding of God. Right? Think about it for a moment. When we're a child and our parents don't give us the food that we want to eat, or the drink that we want to drink, or the toy that we want them to buy for us, at the end of the day, we get so upset and so angry. And a child who's at a really young age, they say, if you don't give me this, I don't love you anymore. And we as a good parent respond, even if you don't love me, I'm still going to love you. And then they feel bad, right? Many a time, our relationship with God is very similar. Oh Allah, I really want to get this job. I want to drive this car. I want to make this much money. And when we don't get whatever it is that we're asking for, we question the existence of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. You go to Maulana and you say, does Allah really exist? Because I make dua all the time, but God doesn't respond to my dua. But He responded to your dua 10 years ago, and 5 years ago, and last week. Just a new dua, He hasn't responded yet. But all of a sudden now, we question the existence of the Lord of the worlds. So when we come and take a look at this very first and basic understanding of what it means toward loving God, it's a bit shallow. We only love God, or we only meant to love God because God gives us things. What happens when God takes those things? At the end of the day, that's not real love, is it? That's not real love. So there's a higher level. And a second group of theologians, they said no. That understanding of what it means toward loving Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is too basic. And the human being is a little bit more grateful than only loving Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala because we are a recipient of whatever it is that we're a recipient of. So they state, no, we love Allah Azza wa Jal because Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, He Himself has these most beautiful names and attributes that we spoke about before, and every human being loves these names and attributes. Allah is all merciful. He is the all just. He is all patient. He is all compassionate. He is all love. And every single one of these qualities and names and attributes are that which every human being, regardless of your background culturally, religiously, ethnically, doesn't matter, every single human being loves love. Every human being loves justice. Every human being loves mercy. Every human being loves compassion. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, He is the one who contains all of those names and all of those attributes in the most perfect form and variation. The only thing that we know and understand is it from a human form. Over here, we begin to understand what exactly it means toward loving Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. But there's a third level as well. And again, this is the love that the awliya of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala have. This is what we learn from the Messenger of God and his family. That through our understanding and through our obedience and through our devotion to Him subhanahu wa ta'ala, we find that God places His love in our hearts, and He makes those moments of communication and obedience and dua and worship beautiful at that given moment. Whereby we love toward making tawaf around the holy Kaaba. We love to fast during the holy month of Ramadan. We love to stand up in the middle of the night to perform Salatul Layl. It doesn't come without any effort. It doesn't come without a sense of urgency. It comes with a sense of building ourselves up to that capacity, and that in and of itself is the highest form and manifestation of love. So how does God place this love in our hearts? Number one, like we said before, it starts with our effort. But then we also see that God Himself presents some unique incentive for us within the Quran and within the ahadith of the Prophet and his family. Let me give you some examples. Amongst the names of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is that He is Al-Habib, Ya Habib Qulub As-Sadiqeen. As we recite in Dua Kumail, Oh Allah, You are the beloved toward the hearts that are truthful and sincere. That Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, He doesn't need the creation like we know, but yet He considers Himself the beloved, and the object of everyone's love if we seek it from Him subhanahu wa ta'ala. Another name of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, or another attribute that we speak to Him or we communicate to Him via, is the fact that Allah Azza wa Jal is a friend to each and every one of us. Ya khayra sahibin wa jalis, as Imam Zain al-Abidin recites in Dua Jawshin al-Kabir. In the Kitab al-Tawheed of Shaykh al-Saduq, Nabiullah Musa alayhi salatu wasalam is communicating with the Lord of the worlds. And one day a man, he comes toward Musa while he's worshipping. And he states, "Oh Musa, tell me, this God that you worship day and night, is he close or is he far?" At this moment, Musa alayhi salam, he raises his hands toward Allah. And he says, "Oh Allah, how do I respond toward this man?" To which he receives revelation from Allah to tell this man, "Ana jalis man dhakarani," that I sit with the one who remembers me. This is your Lord. This is Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, while every human being might turn away from us at one point or another, they don't have the same love, they don't have the same respect, they don't have the same appreciation, they can't often understand what is in our hearts. Over here we see that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala exposes Himself to each and every one of us, and He states, "I sit with the one who remembers me." أَرَبُّكَ بَعِيدٌ فَأُنَادِي أَوْ قَرِيبٌ فَأُنَاجِي. A man, he comes to Rasulullah Muhammad sallallahu alayhi wa sallam. And he states, "O Messenger of God, is your Lord so far away that I need to call out to Him very loudly? Or is He close such that I can whisper?" And God reveals in the Holy Quran, وَإِذَا سَأَلَكَ عِبَادِي عَنِّي فَإِنِّي قَرِيبٌ, that when my servant asks you about me, then tell him that I am near. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, He consistently seeks toward demonstrating His closeness and His proximity to each and every one of us. And the idea is for us again toward appreciating and recognizing and reciprocating just that. هُوَ مَعَكُمْ أَيْنَمَا كُنْتُمْ. He is with you wherever you are. We slip and we fall and we make mistakes and we distance ourselves from God. But unlike everyone else, who when we wrong them one time we can never look, or they can never look back at us again, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, "Whenever you're ready, I'm here for you. Whenever you want to communicate to me, whenever you want to seek from me, whenever you want to supplicate to me, then know that I'm ready. You just have to open up your heart to me." And a third demonstration of how Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala loves us is that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, He responds to us when we seek forgiveness. In that most beautiful and in the most perhaps comprehensive verse that we have within the Holy Quran, God states, "Inna Allaha yuhib at-tawabin." Can you imagine? Allah Azza wa Jal, He states that surely He subhanahu wa ta'ala loves those who repent to Him. The one who wrongs, and the one who slips, and the one who falls, and the one who makes mistake after mistake, just like you and I. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says that the minute that we make that commitment to return back to Him, not only does He accept, but He also loves you. Not to sound cheesy, not to sound cliche, but Allah, sometimes we need this reminder. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, He loves His creation. And He loves the moment when we admit where we've done things that are wrong, and when we turn back to Him subhanahu wa ta'ala. And we see this in these beautiful words of Imam Ali ibn al-Husayn Zain al-Abidin. Allahumma salli. In Dua Abu Hamza al-Thimali, which we recite during the holy month of Ramadan, we state, تَتَحَبَّبُ إِلَيْنَا بِالنَّعَمِ وَنُعَارِضُكَ بِالذُّنُوبِ خَيْرُكَ إِلَيْنَا نَازِلٌ وَشَرُّكَ إِلَيْكَ سَائِدٌ. We say, "Oh Allah, تَتَحَبَّبُ إِلَيْنَا بِالنَّعَمِ." You demonstrate your love for us by consistently showering blessing after blessing after blessing. And the way that we reciprocate that back to you, وَنُعَارِضُكَ بِالذُّنُوبِ. You give us life, and you give us health, and you give us wealth, and you give us the response to every one of the du'as and supplications that we have. We have air conditioning when it's hot, and we have heat when it's cold. We have clothing to wear. We have food on the table. We have friends, and we have a social network, and we have community, and we have all of these things. تَتَحَبَّبُ إِلَيْنَا بِالنَّعَمِ. Every one of these are because of your love, and we reciprocate all of that love to you, oh Allah, with one way. وَنُعَارِضُكَ بِالذُّنُوبِ. We turn back to you and we sin. With every one of those. With every one of those. With the money that you give us, we don't spend it the right way. With the blessing that you give us on our bodies, we disobey you. With good health, we're not in obedience. Blessing after blessing, we utilize every single one of them to disobey you, O Allah. But it continues, Salamullah alayhi. He states, خَيْرُكَ إِلَيْنَا نَازِلٌ. But O Allah, that your goodness and your blessing and your kindness and your mercy and your compassion, it keeps on falling. We respond with sins and it keeps on falling. وَشَرُّنَا إِلَيْكَ سَائِدٌ. And every one of my evil and despicable and dark vices are the only things that keep on going back up. You bring this down and that's what we send back up. But at the end of the day, oh Allah, you never appoint for your angels to take away any of these blessings for us. We continue in Dua Abu Hamza. And you never tell them, because this person disobeyed with his eyes, that all of a sudden I'm going to take away his eyesight. This person disobeyed with their wealth, so I'm going to take away their wealth. This person disobeyed with X and Y and Z. None of them, none of these blessings, you've never taken any one of them away from us. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, why does He do that? Again, because the opportunity that He gives us, the chance that He gives us, the new day, the new moment, the new blessing that He gives us tomorrow, today, at this given moment, is again, my friends, out of His love. Our perception of God many a times is so negative, so we don't see the love that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is consistently showering us with on a night-to-night and on a day-to-day basis. And this brings me then to the second dimension of the discussion. This is the way in which God Himself subhanahu wa ta'ala demonstrates His love for us. How can we reciprocate back toward Him subhanahu wa ta'ala? The first step to demonstrating our love back toward Allah Azza wa Jal is to do something as simple as fulfilling His commandments. قُلْ إِن كُنْتُمْ تُحِبُّونَ اللَّهَ فَاتَّبِعُونِي يُحْبِبْكُمُ اللَّهُ. Let's say if you claim that you love Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, then follow in the footsteps of mine. And this is the Prophet alayhi salam speaking. Meaning follow in the prophetic footsteps. And then you will find يُحْبِبْكُمُ اللَّهُ وَيَغْفِرْ لَكُمْ ذُنُوبُكُمْ. And you will find that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will show His love for you and He will forgive your sins. And you'll see that God is the most forgiving and the most merciful. And how exactly do we walk in these footsteps of the Prophet ﷺ? Well, you just go back to the Quran. The Quran tells us exactly who it is that He loves. إِنَّ اللَّهَ يُحِبْ الْمُتَوَكِّلِينَ يُحِبْ الصَّابِرِينَ يُحِبْ الْمُؤْمِنِينَ يُحِبْ الْمُحْسِنِينَ. He loves the good doers. He loves those who entrust their affairs toward God. He loves those who are patient. He loves those who are charitable. Who loves those who believe. He loves those. At the end of the day, we know exactly what it is that God loves from the creation. All we have to do is fulfill our duties and our obligations toward Him, subhanahu wa ta'ala, at the very first level, in order to be someone who reciprocates that love back toward Him, azza wa jal. A second stage in terms of our understanding of how to love Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is to fill our hearts with God's remembrance at any and at every opportunity that we get. And this is hard and this is difficult. But we have a hadith from Imam Ja'far ibn Muhammad ibn Sadiq. Allahumma salli ala. In which he states, Alamat hubbul mu'min hubbu dhikruh. A demonstration of the love of the believer is loving his remembrance, meaning loving the remembrance of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. That to being in a state of consciousness and awareness, whereby we see these blessings of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and allowing for ourselves to be reminded of them at every opportunity that we get. And all it takes is a really small action. For instance, like I said before, seeing the signs of God around us, that's a beautiful means by which we can fill our hearts with God's remembrance. These days we have the opportunity to go outdoors, maybe not so much in the wintertime. So go. And when you go outdoors, you look at these trees, and you look at the sky, and you look at these flowers that we spoke about, and you see the oceans, and you see the lakes, and you see the rivers. Allow for all of that to be a means which allow for us to remember Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala's creation and the beauty of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. That through very basic and practical day-to-day tasks, we have the opportunity again to fill our hearts with the remembrance of God. Imam Ali alayhi salatu wasalam in Khutbat al-Muttaqeen, in Khutbat al-Muttaqeen, this famous sermon, he states, أَدُمَ الْخَالِقِ فِي أَنفُسِهِمْ وَالسَّغْرَ مَا دُونَهُ فِي أَعْيُنِهِمْ. He states those who have taqwa, those who have God consciousness, those who feel the presence of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala at every given moment, amongst their qualities and amongst their traits is the fact that they see Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala in everything. And everything else other than God is in the backseat. So it changes the way that we eat. It changes the way that we sleep. It changes the way that we pray. It changes the way that we spend time with family. Because we see Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, or we're striving towards seeing Him, of course not the sight of the eye, but the sight of the heart, through our interactions, through our communications with others. And a third means by which we can reciprocate love back to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is also by loving the creation of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. As the hadith from the Messenger Muhammad sallallahu alayhi wa alihi wa sallam he states, "Irham man fil ard, yarhamukum man fis sama." He states, show mercy, show love, show care, show adoration for the creation, and you will see that the Creator will have that same mercy and love and adoration for you. What do we learn from Ali ibn al-Hussein Zain al-Abidin? Imam Zain al-Abidin, after he passes away, in the holy city of Medina, there was an increase in homelessness and poverty in Medina. And the governor then of Medina, he writes a letter to Damascus. And he states that increase in homelessness and poverty has taken place in the city of Medina. I need you to send over some rations, some funds, some whatever it is, so that we can distribute it to all. And the governor from Damascus writes a letter back to the governor of Medina and says that in the last several decades, you've never told me that there was poverty. There was never homelessness. There was never this case that you're speaking to in the city of Medina. It couldn't have happened overnight. What took place? You know what is said? لَقَدْ مَاتَ سَيِّدْ إِبْنُ رَسُولِ اللَّهِ. That man from the progeny of the messenger of God has passed away. Because he was the one in the darkness of night who would go out and distribute food and drink and wheat and barley to the widow and the orphan of Medina in the same way that his grandfather Ali did. My friends, it doesn't suffice that we worship Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala within our own four walls without making an impact in the streets and the communities that we live in. It doesn't work like that. It doesn't suffice that we solely gather together in the majalis without allowing for the majalis to impact our communities and our societies, and particularly the most vulnerable and the marginalized and the isolated within our communities. That's not what we learned from Zain al-Abidin. He was known for his worship. He was known for his obedience. He was known for this love of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala through these du'as and supplications that we have. But it never ever for a moment stopped him from being out and making the difference in his community that he sought toward making. If we want to reciprocate this love back to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, then amongst those most important steps to perform is to undoubtedly be at the support of the creation of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Sallu ala Muhammad wa ala. And this brings me then to the third and final dimension of the discussion. We understand now how Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala shows love for the creation. We know that there are some steps that we can take in order to reciprocate love back to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, through doing that which He has prescribed, through fulfilling our heart with His love, towards showing love to the creation. The third dimension of the discussion in terms of understanding how we can create and how we can cultivate a community of love as well. And let me just say this with all love as well. A lot of times, many people, they feel uncomfortable, maybe culturally, to talk about love or to show love and affection toward others. To telling someone that I love you, that I care about you, that I miss you, I haven't seen you in a long time. But in reality, we see this as a common custom and amongst a common sunnah of the Messenger sallallahu alayhi wa alihi wasallam and the Imams of Ahlul Bayt, peace and blessings be upon them. Expressing love was never an issue. In fact, it was something that was done so often. And we see this within the Holy Quran, or these words or these terms of love often presented and often spoken about in many of our conversations. For instance, that famous word that we often utilize to explain our love and adoration for Ahlul Bayt. When Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, He states, قُلْ لَا أَسْأَلُكُمْ عَلَيْهِ أَجْرًا إِلَّا الْمَوَدَّةَ فِي الْقُرْبَى. That say, O Messenger, that you do not want anything in recompense for what it is that you do in terms of your service, except that they show mawaddah for your friend. And at the end of the day, this term mawaddah, like we know, has many different depths and many different realities to it, but amongst the most important meanings that linguists present about how we understand this word is it's not only a love that is preserved within one's heart, but is a love that manifests in the body. So that's why when we come toward gatherings like these ones and we show affection via tears and via grief and via what it is that we do in terms of poetry and otherwise, it's a demonstration and a show of love for the Prophet and his family, peace and blessings be upon them. But that same exact word, mawaddah, is not only limited toward Ahlul Bayt, but also in the way that we should treat our spouses. God says within the Holy Quran, وَجَعَلَ بَيْنَكُمْ مَوَدَّةً وَرَحْمَةً. And He has placed, subhanahu wa ta'ala, this reality and manifestation of love in the hearts of both husband and wife. But many a times, we see it all the time, the young, the old, of all ages, of all demographics, of all ethnicities. Why can't we show a little bit more love? It's totally fine, it's normal. And not only that, it's encouraged. Which is why that hadith from the Messenger of God sallallahu alayhi wa alihi wa sallam, in Kitab al-Kafi it states, قول الرجل للمرأة إني أحبك لا يذهب من قلبها. That when a man says to his wife that I love you, it doesn't ever leave her heart. And I'm not talking about the text message that you say I love you, or I love you after you get into an argument or a fight, but something that's actually sincere. People are getting uncomfortable, I'm going to make you a little bit more uncomfortable, it's all good. To showing this reality, my wife's not here, so if anyone knows her, you can send her a text message, tell her I love her. At the end of the day, we see this as a common, again, custom in the way that Ahlul Bayt, they themselves acted, and the way that they demonstrated their love and appreciation for their spouses as well. It is stated that whenever the Messenger of God would return back from a voyage, that Lady Khadija alayhi salam, she would be standing in front of the door. And when the Prophet alayhi salam would enter in through the door, she would state, هَذَا الْحَبِيبُ قَدْ جَاءَ مِنْ سَفَرٍ. She would state, this is my beloved who has come back from a trip. And then she would recite these lines of poetry. She would state, O Rasulullah, O Muhammad, that the women of Egypt, when they saw the face of Yusuf, they cut their fingers. But if the women of Egypt saw your face, O Muhammad, they would remove their hearts and cut it. Imagine if we write poetry for our wives like that. or they wrote poetry for us like that. What a wonderful community based on love we would be living. So number one, to demonstrate this reality and to this extent of appreciation of love to one another, and if I'm helping anyone with their marriage right now, you can thank me later, it's all good. A second demonstration of love is showing this sense of affection toward our children as well. We have a hadith from Imam al-Baqir or Imam Sajjad alayhi salam. He states, قبلوا أولادكم فإن لكم بكل قبلة درجة في الجنة ما بين كل درجتين 500 عام. He states, kiss your children. Literally, kiss your children. Show this sense of affection for your children. For every kiss that you perform on your child raises you a rank in paradise. And in between rank A and rank B is 500 years, meaning this incredibly lofty station just by again demonstrating one's love and affection for their child. Think about it. How could it be? This emphasis in showing affection toward our family members, my friends, we need to do better to being that which exemplifies these ahadith from the Prophet and his family, peace and blessings be upon them. Everything starts with home. Al-mu'min ya'kul bishahwata ahlih wal-munafiq ya'kul ahluhu bishahwata. In the words of Imam Amir al-Mu'mineen, he states that the believer is the one who eats in accordance with the desires of his family. Meaning that whatever my family wants, I'll do it. My family wants to eat at this restaurant, we'll go to this restaurant. They want to go on vacation here, we'll go there. They want to do this, we'll do that. When munafiq, but the disbeliever, the hypocrite is the one who eats his family with his own desires. They come into the house and they rule and they dominate and they say it's going to be this way because I said so, because I'm the one who brings down the big paycheck and I'm the one who pays the mortgage and I do X and Y and Z. No. Totally in opposition with the ethos of the Prophet and his family, alayhi salam. Love of one's spouse, love of one's children, and one more example for the sake of our conversation. In a hadith also narrated from Al-Baqir or As-Sadiq alayhi salam, he states, لا يكون أخوك أقوى منك على مودته. He says, don't allow for your friend, for your believing brother, to show more love to you than you can show to him. You know, sometimes you go out for dinner with your friend, and one person takes out the credit card, then the other person takes out the credit card. When we were kids, we used to laugh at our parents, like, what's going on over here, you know? Why don't you just let the other person pay and buy me a gift with that money? But then as you get older, you realize that again, that's not the sunnah of the Prophet and his family. It says, don't ever allow for your friend to take out that credit card. If you have to punch them in the face, you got to kick them under the table. I'm just joking, right? Don't allow for them to show more love than you can show to them. In other words, again, be in competition with one another for who can show more care, who can show more compassion, who can show more love, so on and so forth. We have hadith after hadith within our tradition that demonstrate the most basic of things with regards to, again, how we can be a community that shows, that demonstrates, that reflects a little bit more love. But it starts with our awareness and our understanding and our love of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, how we can reciprocate that love back to Him, and through that ma'rifah, through that knowledge, through that awareness that we have of God, we're able to allow for this heart to also show that love toward the creation as well. I'll conclude with this hadith. It is said that one day there was a group of visitors who were coming from some place in contemporary Iran toward Medina, toward visiting Imam Ja'far ibn Muhammad and his Sadiq, alayhi salam. And one by one, these men are coming and they're greeting the Imam, alayhi salam. And as he's rising for them and shaking their hands and hugging them and kissing them, he's having them seated in his gathering. There is one elderly man who comes, and he's walking a little bit slower than the rest of them. And the grandson of the Messenger of God, Imam Sadiq, he states, "Oh elderly man," he said, "what's going on?" Why are you walking so slow? Sarcastically. So he states, بُعْدُ الْمُسَافَةِ يَبْنَ رَسُولِ اللَّهِ. He says, we walked a long time, I'm tired. وَاللَّهِ مَا جَاءَ بِي مِنْ حَيْثُ جَئْتْ إِلَّا مَحَبَّتُكُمْ. He states, and O grandson of the Messenger of God, know that we did not come, and I did not tire myself, and I did not exhaust myself, except for one purpose, and that's out of my love for you, O grandson of the Messenger of God. At this moment, the Imam alayhi salam responds, it was Imam al-Baqir, he responds, أبشر فأنت والله معنا تحشر. Listen to these words. He states, I swear to God, because of this, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will raise you in paradise with me. At this moment, he responds, Ma'akum yabna Rasulillah, with you, me with you, who am I and who are you? Na'am, he responds, Salamullah alayhi, ما أحبنا عبد إلا حشره الله معنا وحل الدين إلا الحب. He states, yes, and I swear to God that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will raise all of those who love us with us, because at the end of the day, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says in the Holy Quran, قُلْ إِن كُنْتُمْ تُحِبُّونَ اللَّهَ فَاتَّبِعُونِي. And that what is religion except for love? For God says within the Holy Quran that if you demonstrate your love, or if you want to show your love for Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, then follow me, then follow the Prophet, then walk in their footsteps, and also show that sense of love and adoration for them. But again, the love that is transformational, the love that allows for us to commit toward a life that resembles their life, that mirrors their actions, that allows for us to see God the way that Ali ibn Hussein saw God, a way that allows for us to impact the communities that we live in the same way that Zayn al-Abidin impacted the community that he lived in. We don't come here gathering after gathering, week after week, during these nights, year after year, spend out of our wealth, out of our time, exhaust ourselves, except with one ultimate objective and purpose, and that is to demonstrate our loyalty and our appreciation and our love for Muhammad and his family. Peace and blessings be upon them. And through this man that we come to recollect and gather and commemorate on this eve, we understand what it means to love. We understand what it means to show affection. We understand what it means to grieve. For it was Imam Zayn al-Abidin, day after day, he would walk in the marketplace of Medina for 35 years. And anything and every moment that reminded him of the day of Ashura, he would utilize that as a teaching opportunity for his community. Every one of you are familiar with that moment when he walked by that butcher and he sees that man about to sacrifice that goat. And he says, "Oh man, let me ask you a question." He says that before you sacrifice this goat, before you sacrifice these animals, do you give it drink? Do you give it food? He says, of course, Yabna Rasulullah. There's still an animal. How could I not feed it? How could I not allow it for some drink? At this moment, Imam Zayn al-Abidin turns toward the city of Karbala and he states, "Oh my father, Aba Abdullah, look in the marketplace of Medina, they give the goat and they give the cow water and food, but they left you alone, thirsty and hungry on the day of Ashura." Every opportunity that he got, the Imam alayhi salam, one day Aba Hamza al-Thimari comes toward him and he states, "O grandson of the Messenger of God, for 30 plus years I've seen you in the state of grief. I'm worried about you. Why do you have to grieve so much? You are used to tragedy, you are used to trial, you are used to tribulation." Toward Imam Zayn al-Abidin responds, he said, "Yes, we are, and we're also used to martyrdom, but at the same time, do you know what they did to children? Do you know what they did to our women? I grieve for the women and the children of the daughters of the Messenger of God." Every single opportunity that he had, Zayn al-Abidin, he would make sure to remind his community over what took place to Abu Abdullah al-Hussein on the day of Ashura. And I'll just narrate to you these three glimpses into these incredible difficulties that the Imam alayhi salam had to endure. The first one of these moments that were truly painstaking for Imam Zain al-Abidin alayhi salam undoubtedly was on the night of the 11th of Muharram. After everything that had taken place on the day of Ashura, it is said that they came to loot the tents of the women and the children of Abi Abdullah al-Hussein alayhi salam. It is said that they enter into the tent of Imam Zain al-Abidin, who, like we know, was ill, who was sick. It was too difficult for him to move. One man calls out and says, "Let us kill him." The other one says, "No, let's imprison him." Another one says, "No, let us kill him, for he is from the sons of Ali and from Hussein." Another one says, "No, let us just imprison him." Eventually they decide that they're going to leave the Imam alayhi salam, but instead of leaving him in that state, they begin to surround him and they begin to beat him at that moment. It is said that everything that he had to endure, the trials and the tribulations of that night, the only thing that we have are certain glimpses into what he experienced, salamullah ta'ala alayh. A second difficulty of the Imam alayhi salam was in that voyage between Kufa and when he entered into the outskirts of the city of Damascus. It is said that one of the military general of Yazid ibn Muawiyah calls out to the people of Damascus. They say, "These are the enemies of God and these are the enemies of Rasulullah, so do to them as you please." Women, children from on the top of balconies and from the streets, they began to pelt the family of the Messenger of God with rocks and with stones. And it is said that one man from on top of a balcony, he threw a torch that was lit with fire on them, and it fell on the head of Imam Ali ibn Hussein Zain al-Abidin, and it began to burn the head of Ali Zain al-Abidin. You know what happens? The Imam tries to lift his hands toward removing that torch, but the hands of the Imams were tied. It is said that a companion, a man by the name of Minhal, he sees Imam Zain al-Abidin. He comes to him. He says, "Yabna Rasulullah, O grandson of the Messenger of God." He says, "Can I be of help? Can I be of any assistance?" He says, "Yes, bring me some cloth." At this moment, he goes to the marketplace. He brings some cloth while the Imam alayhi salam is standing, waiting to enter into the court of Yazid ibn Muawiyah. He says, "O Yabna Rasulullah, O grandson of the Messenger of God, do you want this piece of cloth so you can make sujood now?" He says, "No, O Minhal." He says, "I want you to remove these chains." At this moment, he begins to remove the chains on the wrist of the Imam. Minhal says, "The minute I lifted it, I saw that blood began to gush. I saw that blood began to gush from the wrists of my master Ali ibn Hussein Zain al-Abidin." And the third difficulty, of course, that the Imam had to encounter was on a day like the day that just passed us, on the 25th of the month of Ramadan, 35 years after the day of Ashura, when that poison from the Umayyads began to inflict the body of Imam Zain al-Abidin alayhi salam. It is said that he was lying in his final moments with his son Muhammad al-Baqir around him, along with other members of his family and companions. And it is said that the Imam alayhi salam begins to recite his final will, and then he begins to call out, "Ashhadu an la ilaha illallah wahdahu la sharika lah, wa ashhadu anna Muhammadan abduhu wa rasuluh." It is said that he recites the final testimony. It is said that at this moment, the last breaths of the Imam alayhi salam, they begin to become released from his body. At this moment, the women and the children from around the Imam, they begin to weep and they begin to grieve. Imam al-Baqir alayhi salam, he embraces his father. "But I say to you, O Ali Zain al-Abidin, that at the very least your family was near you, your children were near you, you had ghusl, you had kafan, but there was one man in history who had no ghusl and who had no kafan and who was alone with only his enemies surrounding him and only the hooves of the horses on his chest in his final moments, and that was your father Abu Abdullah al-Hussein, who Umar ibn Sa'd says, O horses of Allah, which one of you are going to trample upon this body of Ali and Zahra?" At that moment they begin to etch the body of your master Hussein into the plains of Karbala. Ala la'natullah ala al-qawm al-zalimin, inna lillah wa inna ilayhi raji'un. Ya Hussein, Matam Hussein.
Ya Hussein, Ya Hussein, Ya Hussein, Ya Hussein, Ya Hussein, Ya
ہے یہ آپ کے چوتھے امام کا تابوت ہے یہ آپ تھے امام کا تابوت ہے یہ آپ کے چوتھے امام کا تابوت ہے یہ چوتھے امام کا تابوت ہے یہ آپ کے چوتھے امام کا تابوت ہے یہ آپ کے چوتھے امام کا تابوت ہے چوتھے امام کا وارث جو ایک بچا تھا شہ تشنا کام کا تابوت ہے یہ آپ کے چوتھے امام کا تابوت ہے یہ آپ کے چوتھے امام کا تھے پیچھے پیچھے جس کے رسن بستا اہل بیت تھے پیچھے پیچھے جس کے رسن بستا اہل بیت اور آگے جس کے نیزے پہ سر تھا امام کا تابوت ہے یہ تھے امام کا تابوت ہے یہ آپ کے چوتھے امام کا ہاتھوں میں ہتھ کڑی تھی تو پاؤں میں بیڑیاں ہاتھوں میں ہتھ کڑی تھی تو پاؤں میں بیڑیاں اور زخمی طوق سے تھا گلا جس امام کا تابوت ہے آپ کے چوتھے امام کا تابوت ہے آپ کے چوتھے امام کا بیچارگی وقت کو زینب سے پوچھئے بیچارگی وقت کو زینب سے پوچھئے بے دفن لاش چھوڑ کے چل نا امام کا تابوت تھے امام کا تابوت ہے یہ مولا نے شہر شہر بڑے غم اٹھائے ہیں مولا نے شہر شہر بڑے غم اٹھائے ہیں کس غم کا تذکرہ کروں اور کس مقام کا تابوت کے چوتھے امام کا تابوت ہے تنہا نہیں ہے آپ یہاں پنجتن بھی ہیں تنہا نہیں ہے آپ یہاں پنجتن بھی ہیں رو رو کے پرسہ دیجئے مظلوم امام کا تابوت ہے یہ آپ کے چوتھے امام کا تابوت ہے یہ آپ کے چوتھے امام کا یا حسین یا حسین
وقت سجاد نے کیسے وہ گزارا ہوگا. 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 نام زینب کا جو غیروں نے پکارا ہوگا. وقت سجاد نے کیسے وہ گزارا ہوگا. وقت سجاد نے کیسے وہ گزارا ہوگا. لو حسین ابن علی پیاسے ذبح ہونے لگے. لو حسین ابن علی پیاسے ذبح ہونے لگے. کتنا شرمندہ وہ دریا کا کنارہ ہوگا. وقت سجاد نے کیسے وہ گزارا ہوگا. وقت سجاد نے کیسے وہ گزارا ہوگا. وہ گیا زین سے زینب کی ردا کا ضامن. وہ گیا زین سے زینب کی ردا کا ضامن. کون اب فاطمہ جائی کا سہارا ہوگا. وقت سجاد نے کیسے وہ گزارا ہوگا. وقت سجاد نے کیسے وہ گزارا ہوگا. سر میدان تو جانے تو لگا ہے اصغر. سر میدان تو جانے تو لگا ہے اصغر. کس طرح تیرے بنا ماں کا گزارا ہوگا. وقت سجاد نے کیسے وہ گزارا ہوگا. وقت سجاد نے کیسے وہ گزارا ہوگا. نوک نیزہ پہ بہانے لگے آنسو مولا. نوک نیزہ پہ بہانے لگے آنسو مولا. پھر سکینہ کو کسی شخص نے مارا ہوگا. وقت سجاد نے کیسے وہ گزارا ہوگا. وقت سجاد نے کیسے وہ گزارا ہوگا. یا حسین 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 حسین
محمد وعلی.
أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. السلام عليك يا رسول الله. السلام عليك يا أمير المؤمنين. السلام عليك يا فاطمة الزهراء سيدة النساء العالمين. السلام عليك يا أبا محمد الحسن. السلام عليك يا أبا عبد الله. السلام على الحسين وعلى علي بن الحسين وعلى أولاد الحسين وعلى أصحاب الحسين جميعا ورحمة الله وبركاته. السلام عليك يا علي بن الحسين السجاد. السلام عليك يا محمد بن علي الباقر. السلام عليك يا جعفر بن محمد الصادق. السلام عليك يا موسى بن جعفر الكاظم. السلام عليك يا علي بن موسى الرضا. السلام عليك يا محمد بن علي الجواد. السلام عليك يا علي بن محمد الهادي. السلام عليك يا حسن بن علي العسكري. السلام عليك يا حجة بن الحسن المهدي، أجل الله تعالى فرجه وسحر الله تعالى مخرجه. السلام عليكم يا أهل بيت النبوة جميعا ورحمة الله وبركاته.